Good afternoon, everybody, particularly online, and the hundreds that are joining us in this room. That's where you're supposed to cheer in the room, but that's okay. Welcome to our presentation. We're going to be talking about building VR's future using the dual customer approach. I'm really thrilled to be a part of this presentation. To introduce myself, I'm Harley Engelman. I am currently a contract consultant with CSAVR, the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation. Long title. We'll keep with the acronym, right? CSAVR. I uh, I am the liaison for CSAVR to the TAC QE. So it's been my pleasure to work over the last close to 5 years now with the partners here at TAC. Um, I'm joined today by really the individual that I consider one of the leading, if not the leading expert on the delivery of business services through the VR program. She helped develop the idea of the dual customer approach. She is currently the Director of Business Relations for CSAVR. Kathy West Evans. Kathy?
Hello, everyone. I think Harley's already introduced me. Thank you for joining us.
So Kathy and I have talked about how we want to do this presentation because for us, a lot of this information, quite honestly, has just been ingrained into us for the last 20 plus years. Um, and so we're going to kind of do this conversational style as we go through these things. We encourage you certainly to look at the bullet points on the screen, but we're going to be really talking about some of the key aspects of why this has occurred and what are the things that really are the most important, particularly, freeze, bear with me just a minute. So little tech issue. Thank you for bearing with us. Where I was going with this, though, is we really, again, having a conversation about this more so because I think it's really important, particularly as a VR counselor, to understand where the program is moving and the importance really of the dual customer approach. And we're going to touch on that as we move forward, particularly the history, because you can't look forward unless you have a little bit of an understanding of what's occurred in the past and what led to the creation of the dual customer approach and how it actually now is cemented in law. So we're going to touch on that as well. There are a couple of things, though, that Kathy and I talked about ahead of time that we want to kind of lay out before you, though, ahead of time. And that really is two key points. And I'll take the first one because Kathy really is, the other one is one that Kathy really talks an awful lot about. For the time that I've come to the TAC and worked with the individuals, one of the terms that I have forcibly and verbally kind of fought back on and tried to encourage people to move away from, and that is the term engagement, business engagement. And I'm going to put this a little bit into perspective for you and think about it this way. For those of you who have ever been in a long-term relationship or are married, um, did you automatically, the first time you met that individual, kneel down and ask them to marry you? And it sounds simplistic, but did you get engaged before you build a relationship? Did you get to know the individual before you asked them to marry you? That's actually the same concept when you think about business services. We are talking about relationships, building relationships first. And that means understanding who, what, when, where, why that business exists and everything that wraps around their operations. And if you don't understand that, then how can you truly provide the key element that we talk about in vocational rehabilitation for our individual customers, right? Informed choice. So to be able to do that, we have to talk very effectively about the business. We have to learn from them. The key to that then comes to listen first. Always listen first. But again, I just would encourage you to move away from that term engagement and think about relationships. Working with business and building relationships with them is not wrapped around canned elevator speeches. It can't be. That one pitch does not build long-term relationships. It may get you somewhat in the door, but it doesn't involve really placing individuals in those long-term career opportunities. And that's really what we're looking at for VR. I think, Kathy, you want to talk about the WIOA then?
I have to follow your slides, Harley.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I'll keep you on track.
I know you will.
Okay. So why are we thinking about this? Why did this idea even come to mind? We've been in the field for a while. Okay, and I started out in a community agency. I've worked in VR, I've worked in RSA, and I'm in the role I'm in now. But one thing I saw early on is people working with individuals. Sorry, we're having prompts from our people here on technical assistance. People working in the field were making a lot of assumptions about, I just want to put someone in a job, first job, any job. What did that mean to the person? Okay. Do you really understand what a career looks like? And if you're going to have a plan, that individual plan for employment, you've got to begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, I've borrowed this from him. I give him lots of credit. It means to start with an understanding of your destination. Do you understand the career path? Do you understand that company? And when you do, how do you support that person in moving in the right direction toward that? Okay. So we're helping someone on that career path. It's not just putting them in a job. So again, now Harley, he will give you a sermon on this again, but it's about building relationships and not just engagement. A lot of times, I think of relationships are those that you build over time, right? You continue to build the trust, you continue to grow, even past the engagement piece, Harley. If you're in a good relationship, it continues to grow, right? So that relationship changes over time. When the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act um, was implemented in 2014, it amended the Rehabilitation Act. And the reason that I say that this is so important is because there's a different strategy. Okay. In the Rehabilitation Act, there's 7 titles. They are built around the concept of a plan for a person. Okay. It's the employment piece, it's the career piece, it's independent living, it's helping support that person as a person. That's why they call it the individual plan for employment. Okay. A lot of people use the term person centered planning. It's the concept. So you get that. A lot of times in labor agencies, we see a menu. Select from this menu, and here's the service you get. It's not always a person focused approach. For individuals with disabilities, we know that that individualized approach is so important that every person, though they may have the same diagnosis on paper, has different needs. It's impacted by age of onset, severity, family structure, community. I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but thinking about that. So when we looked at how we would amend it, prior to 1973, there was one section in the Rehabilitation Act, Section 109, that talked about VR's ability to work with business. It said 2 things. 1, you can tell business you exist. 2, you can tell them about the ADA. That was it. What happened when a group of us started getting together, and I worked for the vocational rehab agency in Washington State, where we built a business relations program in the mid 80s. We started noticing other states were thinking about this too. In fact, we started working with the same businesses. And business would say, well, you're in Washington, but who's my point of contact in North Dakota, Alabama, Massachusetts, right? And we're going, we don't know, but aren't you a system that's funded together? Even though you all have different names. And what does VR mean? Is that virtual reality? What do you do? So we started to see that issue. So we gathered and started talking about what does a dual customer approach look like? And I have to give credit to Dr. Chris Lewis out of Michigan, who joined us from the School for Business there and helped us really think this through. So we're looking at candidates. I want you to understand why terminology is so important. Job seekers we see often. Are people really just seeking first job, any job? When we go to a business, if we tell them it's a job seeker, they're looking at that. What is the difference between a candidate and a job seeker? When we look at the education they need, we're working with the businesses, we understand the training and the support services that they need. And we're also working with the business to help understand the business. Now, the senior vice president of Lowe's, Steve Szilagyi, see, I still remember his name. He was at a CSAVR meeting with all of our directors from around the country. There are 78 programs. And he said, "We're not an employer, we're a business. And if you don't know the difference, meet me in the hallway after this session." We're not just working with HR, right? It's about understanding the whole business as well. So when we had an opportunity to provide feedback on the amendments to the Rehabilitation Act in through the Workforce Investment Act in 2014, we were able to expand the language for working with business to include a number of services. And I'm going to tell you how we got there. But the important thing is that it expanded our ability within agencies to start engaging with business at that level. So as we built careers with individuals, we could incorporate it based on real career information. Okay. There's a whole section there. The second thing it did was there is order of selection. How many of you are familiar with VR? Kelly, you are. But if you're in order of selection and a person is in danger of losing their job due to a disability, because disability happens at any point in the employment life cycle, you are able to serve that person as a priority. Because we were on the Hill talking with congressional members and staff, and they said, yeah, it doesn't make sense to let someone lose their job and then come to you. Okay. We all know what that means, what it feels like to lose a job. You're experiencing a change, you've acquired a disability, now you're losing a job. You're at that point, you're dealing with a lot more than the disability itself. Adjustment to disability, mental health, etc., working with families. So that was a great piece. And, the ability to work with a business up front. We all know what we all know what the number one barrier to people with disabilities in the workplace, right? Is people don't know what they don't know. What business told us is we don't know what we don't know and we're afraid to ask. It's that attitudinal barrier. A person is more than their medical diagnosis. So the ability to get in and work with the business prior and build that confidence and build that skill set. Harley and I talk about building an IPE, and then we also build an IBE, an IPB, an individual plan with business. That's not in law yet, but this all happened because in 2004, we were at a national employment conference, which was hosted by CSAVR and the Rehabilitation Services Administration, our federal partner, and George Washington University. And we said, we keep coming to these employment conferences, but where are the businesses? Are we talking to ourselves? So we invited business to come and join us. And we sat down at a round table with 35 businesses. They were from across the country, large, small, private, public, federal. We had Fort Richardson, Alaska there, and their HR manager. But we had what is now called Wells Fargo. It was South Trust, which was acquired by Wachovia, which was acquired by Wells Fargo. So we had them there. The CEO of CVS was with us, and we had a small welding company out of Pennsylvania. So it was all types. And we asked them, what do we need to do differently? If we're building a strategy for a program, what do we need to do differently? And we gathered that feedback. And here's the feedback. Work as a national team to support businesses. Understand what your national and global market looks like. Okay. So really thinking about, that business could be multiple states. How are you bringing everyone together? Again, because businesses would say we'd call, no one returns our call. Where do I find you? Are you the Division of Work Rehab, the Commission, the XYZ? 78 different names. Are you under labor? Are you under health and human services? Are you under whatever? Are you a standalone agency? Our system is confusing enough to us. So from a business looking in, how do we make it easier for them? Build trust and long-term relationships with the business. You're going to hear us say that over and over again. When we're bringing new people in, we often say, you're not going to start a good relationship by threatening a company with a lawsuit. So we need to understand the laws, but we also have to help companies learn how to implement them. And that's part of our role. Deliver what you commit to. When you commit to a company, deliver on it, even if that means multiple states. Understand the business overall, not just HR, and learn about the multiple opportunities that you have for consultation with that company. What do they need? Be open, listen, right?
Yeah. And as Kathy said, you're going to hear a lot of these things as we go through this, but you're also going to make a connection. If you are a VR counselor, are some of these ideas so different than what you're doing with the individual customer? You have to build trust with them to begin with. You have to build relationships with them, right? So, I mean, those are core tenets to VR counseling.
Absolutely.
And so we're just saying, look, we're just going to apply them a little bit further. And now we're going to look at the second customer, which the dual customer. I mean, it is now mandated in law. We have two customers for VR. So that's critically important to look at that. And the other thing I'd like to really add again is because Kathy just touched on it. Keep in mind, if you don't know, there are 78 different VR agencies. So you have some that are combined, then you have some general, and then you have some that are geared towards the visually impaired or blind. And so the combination of those, again, Kathy's right, 78 different agencies and why they are governed underneath the common laws, they may operate very differently within their different states. And so how do you cross those state lines when you're working with business? And I think we'll get to that, right, Kathy?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, what business said? Think globally about us. Again, think locally, multi state, and national. Build those VR teams around the business. Share strategies, practices, and models across your team so that we're not having to redevelop the strategy or the model in every location within our company. Build one, build it together, and then move that strategy. And then focus on that quality and continuous improvement and build for sustainability. So you may rethink and grow over time, but do you still have your team together? Are you still able to support? Are you helping build that talent pipeline? So you're focused on recruiting, hiring, and retention and continual growth of that company. Anything to add? I'm looking at Harley over my
yeah,
shoulder. Okay. So what happened? In 2005, we had directors sit in and listen to this conversation. And in 2005, CSAVR funded the role of the director of business relations to develop that strategy on the national level. And I was hired. Okay. So I've been with CSAVR for 20 years. And we built it from the ground up. The thing I'm really very proud about the net is it was built on the experience of people doing the work in the field and listening from both individual customers as well as business customers. They were on our team as we designed it. We have people with disabilities on our team who had been served by VR and are now in these roles. So that continuous improvement and recognition that when we look at a dual customer strategy, we're building with them, not about them, without them at the table. And that's how the net was born. That's how we built that national VR business network. Each director has selected a single point of contact that's part of the net. So we have representatives in every state, the territories, and the District of Columbia. And we work collaboratively across the country. We just met last week with a new company partner. They're global, but they have a large footprint in the US. They will be hiring 10,000 people. We are strategizing with them on how to do that. We also have included our partners at veterans readiness and employment. So veterans with disabilities, because if you're a veteran who has acquired your disability during service, you're served by their system, but you can also be supported by ours. If you're a veteran who's acquired a disability after service, your voc rehab services come from us. So how do we work cross system? We've also partnered with Social Security and the employment networks. You've got to learn from each other as well as your community partners, right? We've got large systems and we're trying to bring them together and develop that local, regional, and national perspective. So, the vision statement. Did you want to cover
Yeah.
this or did you want to? This is, we
Which was,
developed this together.
yeah,
So,
read it first. And
okay,
let's,
teamwork. Okay, this was the vision statement that we all created together to create a one company model, okay, the net, to serve business customers through a national VR team that specializes in employer development, business consulting, and corporate relations. And that's what we started in 2005.
I think when you look at the vision statement, at a different time, previous part of my life, I was an adjunct professor at a university in Bismarck, North Dakota, where I live. And I was teaching MBA students on marketing because that is really is my area of expertise, even though I've taken that area and really pinpointed it towards disability messaging, and particularly of the VR agencies. And really the idea of painting a one company approach that also means a one company voice. That means common messaging, that we are talking the same way. Now, the reality is, as we've talked, and Kathy has such significant experience in this arena, is that we understand, even as a VR counselor in the variety of different states out there, that oftentimes you may feel like you're on an island, but you're not, because you have colleagues and you have collaborators in every state working in this arena. So you can learn from each one of them. So being able to develop that common company approach, that vision, that one company vision that we were talking about is really just a matter of being able to reach out. As part of when I was teaching, I really stressed the importance of a vision statement. And I couldn't believe how many of the students really kind of fought back on that and said, well, what's the use of a vision statement? For me is, well, what is a vision statement? It is a look forward, right? It's where you want to go to. Well, how can you set your path if you don't know where you're going? And so we go back to the Stephen Covey quote, right? Begin with the end in mind. And so, what is your ultimate goal? So, if you have that vision in your mind, if that vision statement has been articulated to you, you know where you want to go. And so, I think that's so critical to this part of the picture. And again, I want to stress, though, as we move forward, though, is that think in terms of a global team. You are not alone. You are not an island. And if you don't know who your point of contact is within your respective agency, find out, because their connection to the net is the bringing opportunities to your agency, to your individual customers that you're working with. And Kathy and I will use the word customers. And I know that agencies, some will use clients, some will use participants, some use customers. We understand that. We also want to go back to we need to find a common language, just like we need to find a common name so that we can properly brand. And we're going to touch on that a little bit further. I did want to call it, because Kathy touched on it too, though, but on the slides, you're going to see the logo, the NET, the National Employment Team, which is the result of the education that business gave us, is celebrating its 20th year. That's a milestone to have an initiative like this, really building partnerships with businesses on a national stage and now globally with some of the companies that we're working with. There is not a state in this union, and there is not a territory, a U.S. territory, that is not touched by one of the businesses that have been built around the partnership that has been developed through the net in some way, in some form. So if you're thinking, I'm from North Dakota, if you're living in North Dakota, or you're living in Wyoming, or you're living in some very rural state, if you're thinking that the net doesn't touch you, you're wrong. There are opportunities, particularly, if anything, COVID taught us remote work opportunities. They exist, and these companies all are building towards that, having those hybrid systems in place. So Think globally. Don't think locally anymore. Think globally. And with that, you're going to open up far more parameters for your customers.
This causes me to think, Harley and I do this back and forth. Also, with the companies we're working with, our long-term partners, you have to think about the smaller companies in their supply chain. Okay. When you develop a relationship, and I live about 10 miles from the Microsoft headquarters, so I've worked with them since the mid 90s. They have been very clear with their suppliers, the diversity within their supplier network. Oops, I said the word, sorry. Within their supplier network. And looking at and that and having you as a resource, having your team as a resource wherever they have a footprint and their suppliers have a footprint gains a big strategy and big collaboration to think of it when you think about that way. So we're thinking about remote work. We're thinking about the whole supply chain that supports a company and how our system can respond. Because we're not only bringing services that were defined by business, we're bringing candidates. So think about the system in the bigger picture. When we connect with the business, it may be driven from the national level through the state level, regional, state, and to the local level, or it could be a business that connects with one of our team members in a certain city and says, "Oh, you've got a national footprint? Well, here's where we have other operations. Let's talk about how to expand." So we support each other that way. Lessons learned from business. Effective communication means listening. We're not going to market to a company. Our services for individuals, our individual customer, does not look the same as our services for business. We're not there to tell business what they have to do because it's the right thing to do. We are listening to what they need and helping make that match. In sign language, it's this and this. We're connecting the customers. That's our role, and that's what a dual customer model is. We are bringing our customers together. We have to operationalize that response. We can't just say we're going to do it and then not do it. We have to deliver what we promise. And again, as Harley said, we have to do it through consistent messaging. Um, I love how you've added the word obsessive about quality in here, Harley. Yeah, it is. And build it for sustainability.
Yeah, you'll notice some of the key words even in this point. When you think about it, again, we're talking about trust. We're talking about communication, uh, responsiveness. The one word that Kathy said that I added that I really wanted you to kind of get in your vocabulary is be obsessive about delivering quality services, whether it's to the business customer or to your individual customer. And again, we recognize the fact that depending upon the area where you live, in the agency that you're working with, you may have significantly high caseloads. That we understand. And as a counselor, you're working through those and you're doing your best. But one thing you have to really put into your vocabulary, whether you're delivering the services to either one of the dual customers, is you have to be obsessive about quality. Because what happens if you don't get it right, particularly for the individual customer? If you don't get it right and you make a mistake, who ends up coming back through your door? It's that individual again. So if you're obsessive about quality service delivery and really working to find those best matches and the career opportunities, and that's something we're going to keep on preaching about is move off this train thought about jobs and job placement. We're talking about career development. That's where we want our customers to go to, right? We want them to get into a job, a career, and we want them to grow in that career. We want them, and again, that comes through understanding what that business is, right? If you understand the upward mobility opportunities within that business, that's an opportunity for that person to grow and find success. That's all the ultimate goal on it, right?
Yeah. Sometimes they don't stay with the same company. Sometimes they move, but they're in that career ladder where they've gained the skills and now they're growing. We've connected with the company. There's trust. They're mentoring individuals. They're supporting that individual growth because it contributes to the company growth. The challenges, business awareness and understanding of VR staff. If you haven't done this work, how do you learn about it? How many of our graduate programs are teaching business relations or talking about business? How do we start to build that in? How do we start to train? And we've developed a series that we're reintroducing. Harley and I have updated it. But it's educating not just counselors, mid-level managers and leadership. And it's not just leadership at the top. Those mid-level managers have to really understand why this is important. You have to have a commitment to that structured business service program. If you agree to support a business, you have to be able to deliver across their footprint. The VR team has to understand the importance of that and buy in. We have states where we still have one person, but the leader supports it and there's shared information. Okay. There's maybe a shared database. We create business profiles that we can share. In some states, we have 30 people on a business team. They've been assigned by area. So each state may be structured a little bit, but the key is how you structure it and how it's supported by leadership and how you have the team buying into the dual customer. So even when we built the initial training around this, we started with the individuals to the benefit to the individual customer because we knew talking about the benefit to business would not always resonate with VR counselors. They're in the middle working with the individual. How does it benefit them? And then establish that team that has a communication. And the net has a lot of communication, tell you. COVID didn't slow us down. We were used to that, communicating remotely across multiple time zones. So what we've done is established regional net leads so that we have regional support as well as national support and that support at the state and local. Of
Just want to interject.
course.
Yeah, I just want to interject on one thing here too, because the very first one, because I think as VR counselors and even agency directors, team members, one of the critical issues that are being faced, that's faced right now, obviously, is awareness of the program. People just don't know who we are. Um, we have heard it before. We've had people say it in the past, and we both kind of go, oh yeah. And that is when a business says to you, VR is the best kept secret. And you think that that's a compliment. It's not a compliment. It's really a challenge to us. It's a challenge to educate far more people. And speaking as a marketing person, right, you would expect me to go this way. It's like community awareness. And, when government does not like the word marketing, so let's stick with community awareness on this. But when it's community awareness begins as much inside as it does outside. So if you're thinking that, well, we need to be doing more in the community, we need to have, brochures and advertising, we need to do events. I'm not disagreeing with you. Yes, it is. But does every one of your members in your team and your staff understand the mission of the program, the goals of the program? Can you eloquently explain what you do as a VR counselor? In fact, I challenged you this, and I did this one time at a conference where I was speaking, and I said, get up, introduce yourself to one another, and in one sentence, explain what you do for a living. What is your career? Can you do it? And many people struggle with it. And again, we have to change the mindset and remember that you're career developers, you're workforce developers. You just happen to have a customer base that has abilities that are challenged in some form. As an individual who's legally blind, I will tell you, I despise the word disabilities. I have all sorts of abilities. I lack one sense. Well, my wife says I lack common sense too, but that's another story. So, good Lord, stay with me, people, still with me. Um, so, you know, it's about abilities, and that's really, isn't that what we're delivering to the businesses? We're delivering people with abilities that can provide good quality work to that business, right? So we need to change our mindset. So Can you effectively explain to people? And let me put it in an analogy this way. You take a rock and you throw it in a lake. What happens? The ripple, right? And as the ripple goes out, reaches more and more people, but it starts to fade as well. So our role then as marketing is to make sure that you have great messaging, great tools, but you understand the program and can articulate that so that we can keep that ripple, if you will, focused, right?
Right. So things that were continuing to grow across the country. When we first started, we held, information sessions with business in several states following that national employment conference. We worked with states to help look at how do you create a business advisory group. If you look in legislation now, you're required to have business members on your state rehab council. Do you have business members on your state rehab council? And who are they? We're also looking at how we establish those partnerships with higher education. We want more training on business relations in the training for VR counselors, but we're also working with schools and their business schools on training individuals that are going into business on the abilities of people who happen to have a disability, right? So it works both ways. And we've got those partnerships with, we're looking at Michigan State University has a very active business school that we work with and building out the curriculum there to really start addressing the barriers, those attitudinal barriers that come from what people know. And what business said is we just don't know, we don't know, and we're afraid to ask. And oh, the other thing that we chuckle about, we're government and we're here to help you. Um, so how do we demonstrate that? Okay. And how do we demonstrate that return on investment for them? Number one, we're providing services because it's in our law at no cost. We're investing taxpayer dollars back at work and business. Businesses talk to business. So continuing to think about that and increasing the cross-state collaboration. We also built a talent acquisition portal. And this is a really interesting conversation because we built that at a point where businesses said, great, we've got a partnership. Now, how do we access your talent pool? About 78 of them. Not any, our business specialists didn't even know who was ready to go to work in their state. So we worked with a disability managed nonprofit to build the talent acquisition portal. And you can look more about that at www.tapability.org. We built it with feedback from OFCCP, we're a partner there, and EEOC. It is not built with any kind of AI that screens people in or out, which, we're AI has done wonderful things for our community, but we also have to have guardrails. Okay. And we built it so that the individual can identify the areas that they're available to work. So even though they live in North Dakota, they may want to move to Wisconsin. They can indicate their availability and see those jobs. It has an interface where the counselor's involved, the business relations person, the candidate. You can communicate on the platform. We have candidates who have indicated veteran status. Okay, so whether they're served by VR, we've also invited the VA to have their candidates, as well as our employment network. We have 38,000 candidates on that portal. Businesses pay for it. It's free to VR and our partners. So I want you to kind of contemplate that. And what's exciting, one of the stories that I love to share is about an individual who lives in Nome, Alaska. It's a very remote community. More than rural, it's remote. The person uses a wheelchair. There's no transportation system. He found a remote role on tap. He's now working. And, I think that's the ability to think beyond what you can't do to think about, so how do we make that work? And continuing to develop the VR agency's contact management system. Do you want to address more about that? Because we're seeing that development too and supporting that.
And I think it ties kind of somewhat to TAP. Um, for those of you who are in the room, how many are you aware of what TAP is? Just out of curiosity. Okay, good. That's actually a fair number. Um, it really, I think Kathy did a good job of outlining it, but I want to stress the thing is, it was built by VR professionals for VR professionals. So in other words, it took all the expertise, education, everything that was been learned by individuals who had worked in the trenches, if you will, and put it into the design aspect of this a talent acquisition portal. It allows you and businesses to make that connection on behalf of your customers. This is really important. When it comes to a contact management system, a lot of states right now that, well, the states that have a really defined business services unit really are starting to implement these things. And in some states, they, with their case management system, they have integration, others aren't right now. But what that system allows you to do, or allows the agency to do, is to track those business contacts, but more importantly, to identify the jobs, the roles and responsibilities of those jobs, the culture of that company. Are they in a growth mode? What is their vision? I mean, those are all critical elements that you need to know as you start to develop your relationship. The only way that information gets into that system, however, is through relationship building. And that means going to the business and listening. And I can't, yes, I mentioned that earlier, and I'm going to keep on stressing that. We don't walk in with a preconceived notion. You walk in and listen to what they're telling you. And more importantly, it may sound strange, listen to what they're not telling you. And there is such a thing that exists. If they're not telling you something, don't read into things and say, oh, they're like this. They're not telling you something, I mean, probably doesn't exist. So let's not make assumptions. Learn, listen. And once you have that information, bring it back and put it into the system. That's the beauty of the contact management system. The units that exist, business services units, that's what their specialists are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be building those relationships and then bridging that information with the VR counselor in the respective offices. That's why as we get a little bit further, we're going to talk about the importance of integration. That business services has to be fully integrated with the regular day in and day out aspect.
So, other things we need to consider: ongoing staff training, certifications, understanding how the labor market is growing. Okay. One of the things to think about: we have an aging workforce. Companies are coming to us. How do we retain people? Disability happens at any time during that employment life cycle. So it's matching up front, but it's also supporting companies' retention. And believe me, when you have that kind of relationship, they will be the first one they call. You will be the first one they call when they have a hiring need. Continuing to build that community awareness and the education activities. There is a lot of talk right now about apprenticeships, and they are very important. Not all companies start there, because to be a registered apprenticeship is a process. We've worked with CVS. Kelly knows the story. We've worked with CVS. They needed pharmacy techs. You have to be a certified pharmacy tech to even pack and ship pharmaceuticals. So their distribution centers as well as their retail sites. Started to build a training program. The first class, Boston, Massachusetts VR office. That has grown. It has grown across the country, and it became a registered apprenticeship because the company saw the value. Okay. So work-based learning is a key piece of how we can support individuals as well as the company. And here's where we have that individualized plan for business, the IPB. It's not in law yet, but we'll get there. Coordinating our branding, and Harley could talk for hours on this, but we have got to stick together on what our message is. And you'll notice we have the national employment team, VR is not in there because again, people don't know, but they understand we're a resource focused on that as a goal. We are also partnering with our one-stop system and building on the plans on the strengths of the VR system. Again, that individual planning process, because our partners in the labor agency don't have the same strategy and don't understand it. Like I said, I worked with RSA and we had several meetings with our Department of Labor, and they were very open to partnerships, but they couldn't understand why you had to have mobility training as part of your plan. And I said, well, do you think someone who's blind drives themselves to work? And they just had never thought of it. Okay. So again, it's how you have that cross system strategy and looking at how we continue to grow with both individual customers because they've had feedback throughout this process, okay, of growth, including the talent acquisition portal, as well as business and how we meet them in the middle. Did you want to talk about the sustainability? I'm
Yeah,
going to
I think
switch off and on, you know.
yeah, no, but I
I
think
don't want anyone to fall asleep while we get
oh, yeah,
get
yeah,
me
yeah,
up.
yeah, right, okay. Well, one of the things I should explain to you too is what has been my role now working with the TAC over these last few years. And one of the things that we brought to the table is actually something that I taught on to MBA students, but we, in a sense, retrofitted it to a process that we use for CSAVR. CSAVR, we call it the discovery process. And what we're able to do when a state agency invites us in is we're able to go in and do in basically an enhanced SWOT analysis of the agency or their business services unit, whatever the director or the individuals want us to do. So we can go in and look at a variety of different things. We can look at organizational structure. We can look at leadership, training, education, resources, management. So whatever that agency wants us to do. And we have done this with a number of agencies. And the reason I think that's important is because a number of these things that we're talking about have come through those discovery processes. They have shown up in every one of these processes that we've done. And I think we've done a total, whether through CSAVR or through the TAC-QE, I think somewhere around 7 or 8 of these. And granted, there's 78 agencies, but they're time consuming. They are all based on personal interviews with individuals who have been designated by the agency. So we dig in deep, and those individuals can range from leadership to administrative staff. So we really want to get a picture of what it looks like within that agency. So that's what comes out. The one thing that's here that really kind of stuck to me too, though, is that what we see repeatedly, and that is that when we ask about relationships with the one-stop centers or the WIOA partners, what's your relationship? And usually what we get on the state level is excellent. And then we get into the regional levels in the state and they go, yeah, pretty good. Then we get into the local offices and they go, they don't talk to us. So so the relationship, like anything, is you don't build a house by putting the sticks up first without a foundation, right? So if you really want to build relationships with the WIOA partners, you begin at the local level. You need to find out the common areas that you share. And you need to find out is why is there difficulties with this? Is there communication issues? Is there personality issues? But we need to work through those things, get to them because those partners are viable to us, are viable, but important to us. So striking out and finding those relationships are very, very important to us. So sustainability. I can speak from personal experience to this because the program that I created in North Dakota in 2000, that's what I was hired to do, was to create a business services program. Regrettably, in 2012, North Dakota unexpectedly hit order selection. And the first thing to go was the business services program. And I understand it, the logic of it. I don't understand the logic of it, but I understand the reason for it. But since then, North Dakota is reconstituting. They've got marvelous people that they've brought in, and they're working with them to redevelop their business program and put it back into place again. But we have to learn to understand that this program has to be sustainable. We start building those relationships with business, and then all of a sudden, the business people or business services specialists disappear. What happens to those relationships? They fall through the cracks, right? So that's an important aspect of this whole process is we have to ensure sustainability. Coupled with that, is to make sure they're sustainable, is that we have to integrate it. And we touched on earlier about the education aspect. We understand, as Kathy and I sit here and talk about it, and we've talked in many presentations, that we understand that for most VR counselors in your undergrad program or your graduate program, there is no aspect in that program that touches on integrating, working with business. How do you initiate contact? How do you speak business language? But yet it's a critical element of what you do as a VR counselor, right? So that's a certain thing that we have to address is how do we overcome your discomfort? One of the things I used to say in North Dakota is that, and I made a promise when I was doing it, was that I won't take you out of your comfort zone. My goal is to expand your comfort zone. I want to give you the training. I want to, if you don't feel comfortable in standing up in front of 50 people and talking about business services, can you stand up in front of a staff of 5 and do it? Can we give you the elements, the messaging, the support material, and the comfort level to be able to do that? And if we can do that, we will continue to build the business service program. It's built really upon that integration of the dual customer approach, though. You have to understand it is mandated by law, but we'd rather see you come to the table and say, listen, I can benefit. My caseloads can benefit from this. The goal is not to add more to your plate. In the short term, yeah, you're going to need to learn more. You have to pick up something. In the long term, it's going to make your job as a VR counselor easier.
I'm going to add a couple of things to this. Share strategies cross state. We learn from each other and nationally. And then tell the story. Our program is not just about data. There's a real person behind every one of those numbers. Tell the story from the perspective of both the individual and the business. It says a lot about the work that you do every day. I know we're running short on time, Harley. So, leap and the net will appear. We started this, and this is the quote that our director of the Oregon Commission for the Blind sent us because she was leading CSAVR as the president at the time. And this was kind of her vision. Let's take the leap and this will happen. So we still laugh about that. But yeah, take a chance. It's not really a risk. It's an informed choice for both the business and the individual. Okay. And this is our contact information. I think we have a few minutes for questions. So I know we've got the mic ready to go, and I know we've got people online, so it's okay. Come back up
Hopefully.
here with me.
Yeah.
Don't step out the window, Harley.
The first question is, how much do businesses pay to access Tapability?
Okay. Do any of you know what a recruiting software normally costs a company? $50,000, $60,000 a year. Tap is $7,500 a year. We invested our dollars to develop it, and we sustain it because we're working cross-state. That includes not just posting your job through an automated system. It includes online virtual hiring events and career fairs.
And I should add, though, is that TAP actually does have one of the best resume writers you will see.
Yeah.
It's extremely well refined and defined. So it's a tool. It's an asset to you.
Yeah. Yeah. We had business tell us there are things that people don't share about themselves. Like, do you speak a second language? That can be very beneficial to a company, but how many people include it on their resume? So we built those strategies. Do you have a security clearance, particularly if you're a veteran? You often do include that. So we learned on the resume builder. We got a question from the audience, Arlen.
Can you guys talk about the WIOA common performance measures for serving employers?
They have changed over time and no one can agree upon them. I think we as a program need to start telling our own story I mean, we have to report under that and we negotiate that at the state level, those plans, and there are common performance measures across the country, but there are things that are going unspoken. And I think that's what we have to do is fill in that gap. I mean, our database, though we've asked many times, you cannot go into the national database and find out what businesses are hiring people across state. If we want to get hiring data, we have to go from program to program to program and ask for those numbers. So start to think about how that kind of thing would reflect. Don't you agree, Kelly? I mean, retention with the same employer. So I think people grow over time and it may be retention and upward mobility, but what does the career path look like? And I think you have to look at that. So yeah, right. So she's saying, Kelly, you want me to repeat? Maybe retention 2 to 4 months out is a good thing to look at. But you know, that's just the beginning, I think, don't you? But you know, this is again that strategy of looking at a career and not just sticking someone in a job, because that's when you see the revolving door. And I think that's what that measure really addresses. But that's the only measure. There's no customer feedback on it. There's a lot of things missing. So what resonates for us? What tells the story of the work we're doing?
There is one more question. It's longer, so stick with me when I read it, okay? It says, I've heard you mention partnering and supporting all the state vocational rehabilitation agencies. I didn't hear you mention anything about CANAR, Consortia of Administrators for Native American Rehabilitation, or the AIVRS program / tribal vocational rehabilitation, especially considering you both hail from TVR states like Washington and North Dakota. How are you ensuring equitable services to businesses throughout Indian country and or our tribal nations, whom are all often the largest employer in their respective areas?
That is a great question, and you are right on, Mark. That is a partnership that we're growing. We've been in conversation with Wayne and looking at how we strategize together on business development, but also the utilization of the TAP portal. And it's a process to, you know, for their team. And, you know, I worked in the Region 10 RSA office under Dick Corbridge, who was the main RSA driver for the American Indian Rehab Program and CANAR. I remember going to many conferences and meeting with people. So that's a great question. It's right on point. We're working on it. And if you have ideas, our contact information is there. We would love to work with you. Right. Well, thank you everyone for your time and thank you for listening and being engaged.